Many often point to Steven Spielberg's 1975 classic Jaws as the first ever blockbuster. While many of the techniques used in Jaws were used prior to its opening, its financial success created a formula for future movies to produce equal success. In his article, The Promise is Great, The Blockbuster and the Hollywood Economy, Marco Cucco lists all the necessary facets required for a film to be considered a blockbuster. To be considered a blockbuster, a movie must have involved a high economic investment, a wow factor, which generally means special effects, a plot that is simple and easily enjoyed by a large swath of people, a proclivity for sequels, and the tendency to use well-known stories from books or television that already have a built-in audience. While these aspects define a blockbuster, Cucco points out that blockbusters are vital to studios because they tend to bring back large profits. There's a large economic burden on blockbusters. The focus on blockbusters is due to their potential for extremely large returns. The large influx allows studios to afford to pursue more artistic, less profitable projects without worrying about the loss of funds. However, to produce a blockbuster requires an extremely large investment. That's why blockbusters follow the facets Marco Cucco points out, because that makes them highly entertaining to the largest possible audience. That large audience includes overseas audiences. To be able to execute producing large enough funds to maintain the studio and to overcome the large investment put into the project, globalization is a key component of blockbusters. Hollywood, the home of the blockbuster, is the nexus of the domestic and global spread of films. The mechanisms of Hollywood are complex and have specialized distribution and marketing strategies to help films succeed in both foreign and domestic markets. The distribution tactics involve saturation of theatrical openings across the country to maximize opening weekend returns, while the old system, which involves staggered openings that would cause word-of-mouth advertising, is still incorporated in overseas distribution. The goal is to switch to the more successful saturation strategy to produce larger returns. However, one of the main ways blockbusters are able to bring back returns is videotape purchase, especially overseas. Export of a film and their tape rentals are achieved overseas through special networks that focus on the distribution and marketing in foreign and secondary markets. For example, American studios can own distribution facilities in other countries to control exportation of their product. Additionally, there is also the ability to participate in strategic trade in foreign countries. Strategic trade is when a government is convinced to support the export of Hollywood films to try and help their country in some major way. One example of the effort made to produce blockbusters globally is a deal made with China. Hollywood clearly wants to sell in a market like China's. However, China Film Group only allows 34 foreign films a year. To combat this, Hollywood blockbusters such as Looper and Iron Man 3 make sacrifices so that these blockbusters are considered official co-productions. Looper, for example, took advantage of hiring a certain amount of Chinese crew members, Chinese actors, and even had a few scenes in China. By doing this, Looper was then allowed into the Chinese market because the movie was no longer considered to be a foreign film, while other options follow the path of Iron Man 3. Marvel chose to release a Chinese version of the movie that was tailored to better fit a Chinese audience. This effort is important because films tend to make at least 2/3 to half of the box office receipts in foreign markets. Even with global support of Hollywood exports does not mean that the globalization of blockbusters is undisputed. Scott Olson argues in his article, The Globalization of Hollywood, that Hollywood has become an aesthetic and is no longer just a place in California. Originally, Hollywood was seen as the epitome of American culture, and therefore there is always pushback to Hollywood exports. Blockbusters especially represent an extremely successful endeavor that represents United States culture. Many argue the dominance of Hollywood is just another form of westernization. However, there are other film markets that are extremely successful and prolific without associating with Hollywood or Western culture. Bollywood films are famous for their bright colors, music, and dance, and were able to keep this aesthetic for both cultural and political reasons. As a result, Bollywood's commercial success is an example of how some overcome westernization in films successfully. Additionally, while this culture class is one of the main arguments against Hollywood and the globalization of blockbusters, Olson makes a counter-argument. Hollywood has now become the home of film, but not necessarily American films. He refers to going Hollywood as a term for when foreign countries use Hollywood as a production center to reach a more global audience. The debate still occurs whether Hollywood is the end of diversity or the home of it.